Hello, everybody. Archana is back with Braintunes with Archana in collaboration with Radio Brain Rhyme. Today, I have with me Beauty with Brains, the Barbie doll of, storytelling world. Welcome to my studios, Miss Kristin Pedemonti.
Thank you.
How are you doing, ma'am?
I'm well today, thank you. How are you today?
I'm good too. Thank you so much for asking. Belated Christmas greetings. I see stars and decorations in the background.
Yes, I like twinkly lights all year long, so I just decided to leave them up. And belated Christmas greetings to you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. So I love having you on my show, ma'am, and you are a well-known face in the storytelling world, have done a lot to the society, and you have been associated with several programs. So I would like to know, right from the horse's mouth, who is Miss Kristin Pedemonti?
Oh my gosh, well, there are many facets to that. So it depends what part you want to know. I would say I am first and foremost a kind-hearted, compassionate seeker of understanding and building bridges between people and cultures, seeking to honor our differences and to recognize as well our similarities, always with care and kindness. So that's not giving you my resume, but giving you who I like to be, no matter what I'm doing. I think that summarizes it, and hopefully with some wisdom in there.
True,
And some wisdom and whimsy in sometimes in equal measure.
Right, ma'am. So, ma'am, if I want to know about your resume, I'll just go to the net, key in Miss Kristin Pedemonti, and I get what all I want there. How do I know who the real Kristin Pedemonti is? That's the reason I wanted you to. Who is you according to you? Okay, ma'am. So, ma'am, how did you get into the storytelling world?
So that is not a direct route for me. It was the initial seeds were planted when I was a child, actually. And at school, we used to have something called show and tell. And I did not have a lot of things to bring to show, but I loved to tell. And so I would tell about dreams that I had, I would tell about ideas that I had, and I would share stories. And I honestly had forgotten about that until I found in a box my report cards from like grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. My mom had saved all of that. And I saw what the teachers had written in their notes. And they had written notes about that I would tell stories in wanting to entertain the other students. So the seed was planted a long time ago. And then as a grown-up, as an adult, I did a lot of children's theater when I was in college, and then after college as well. I was in a children's theater troupe. And then the direction changed really quite a lot in that I did cancer research and at a university. And it was not in a laboratory. It was actually interviewing people who had cancer. And they were trying to figure out if they had certain medical things in common that people who did not have cancer did not have. And it turned out in 64 pages of questions, the most important question was tell the story about how you were diagnosed. And this was ovarian cancer, which is very hard to diagnose. And in listening, witnessing the women's stories when they would share, it really taught me about, first it taught me about listening, that deep listening, and that listening when someone's sharing something that's really delicate and being able to sit with them in that space. So it planted another seed that, stories are not only our dreams, they're not only things we read in books, they're our lives. Our lives are stories. And then I was a children's librarian. So my work life story is always connected though. In all the work I've ever done, story is there just in different ways. So I became a children's librarian by chance. I went into a local library. I was reading books out loud. the director heard me. I was just reading to a friend, and the director heard me and asked if I'd like to tell stories to children. I said, oh, I would love that. And she said, can you start tomorrow? And I could, and I did. So that turned into doing all the children's programming from birth all the way up to age 18. And then after that, or actually during that, is when I would do story hour, I would use a lot of the theater that I had learned as a younger person. So I would do really interactive stories, not only what was on the page in the book, but it was how could I get the parents involved in the story so that they felt part of the group, you know, rather than just observing on the outside, bring them in with their children. And then with the children, it was bringing them into the story in different ways. And through the parents, they said, you know, you should do this all the time. And I said, what do you mean? They said, telling stories. You should do this all the time as your full-time job. That's what your job should be. And that was back in 1999. And I went home and I Googled storytelling. And oh my gosh, it could be your job. I was fascinated by that. So it took several years, and I started putting together programs while I was a librarian on using more folk tales, the 398.2s in your library. Mm-hmm. Go check them out if you haven't. It's a wonderful part of your library. And then in 2005, I left that full-time job, and I've been a full-time storyteller ever since. And it was in folk tales, and I still tell some, and it's evolved over time into real life stories to break stereotypes, to learn about other cultures, not only through their folk tales, also through their everyday lives, and to try to change some of the misperceptions we have. So I know that was rather a long answer, but it's because it was not a direct route. There were different influences that impacted. And one final piece is that currently, not only do I still do the performing, I also do work on our self-talk. All of us have an inner narrative in our mind, and there's different ways that that's formed. There's layers to it. So I am, in February, I'm starting a master's program in narrative therapy at the University of Melbourne, and I'm really excited about that. So it's another way that we can use story and be in service to people, being able to tell their preferred life story rather than one that's problematic. So anyway, I'm really excited. And maybe I jumped ahead a little bit, but that's the full encompassing of story in my life, where I am now.
That's the beauty of a storyteller, I guess, ma'am. So what I conclude from your discussion, your speech now is, it started off right in your childhood, and your teachers were the one to spot that spark in you. And it slowly grew. So it was always within you. It just needed some error. It just needed some encouragement as to, hey, you're good at this. Why not try this out? And finally, anything and everything that you did got interwoven. And finally, you are the person who you are today.
Yes, exactly. Beautiful summary.
So thank you, ma'am. So what I have understood is, I have to change my questionnaire completely now.
I'm sorry. Ask whatever you want. Really, you don't have to change anything.
No, that was all very routine. So now you have given me a new line of thought as to, now you have brought in so many things that you have been doing. I would definitely like to know all about this, ma'am. So tell me about your National Storytelling Network.
Oh my gosh. So in the United States, there's an organization called National Storytelling Network, and they are incredibly supportive. And the idea behind it is for mentorship. So for storytellers who have been around for a while, to be in service to those who are new to storytelling. And they hold a conference once a year where what I really love about it is they talk about storytelling from so many different aspects. So there's a Healing Story Alliance, which talks about how to use stories in healing, whether that might be in hospitals or prisons or in therapeutic ways of using story. There's a youth storytelling that focuses more on with children, whether that might be educational and entertainment, both of those together. And there's one where they're talking about storytelling in organizations. How do you help businesses tell their stories? So it's really, what I love is that there's a broad lens that they look through, that there's many different kinds of storytelling. And they also do a festival. Well, the festivals are now sort of smaller pieces throughout the year. And they have several awards that they give to people where they are awards to be supportive. So there's one where they match you with a mentor one-on-one for a whole year and you work together. So it really has a lot about mentorship within. And it's just nice to have a group that's a national group where all the different states can be involved. So I hope that summarizes it okay.
Yeah, it does. And I guess you were also awarded a prize for this project.
So that is for a project I haven't yet mentioned. So I was in 2011 awarded, it's called the StoryBridge Oracle Award. And the idea behind that award is it's given to someone who has built a bridge between different cultures or between people who perceive themselves as different. And that was for a project that I did starting in 2005. I had sold my home and my possessions, and I used a part of that money to start a literacy project in a very small country in Central America called Belize. It's a very small country. Some people might remember it as referred to British Honduras. Belize is a young country. They gained independence only in 1981. So they're still a very young country. And a Belizean, a local person, invited me after meeting me on a snorkel excursion. So the lesson there is talk to people. You never know what amazing things might happen if you simply talk to people. He had never met a storyteller, and his name is Naftali Lemus. And he invited me to come to Belize because of my library work with children and connecting children to books and literacy. And I started a project in working with teachers and librarians to bring more story into the classrooms and also doing book drives to bring more books. At that time, there was not a single bookstore in the country. And so it was finding out a lot of listening to the teachers and the local people. What did they need? What would work for them? And then I did book drives to bring in materials. And then together we created teacher training manuals on how to use these books for things like studying the rainforest or studying the coral reef, because Belize has the second largest coral reef in the world. So it was really about highlighting local nature, also local culture. And over time it evolved, because of all the listening, to utilizing local indigenous legends to teach creative writing. And those legends were gifted. I was permitted to tell them. That's really important, to not take someone else's culture, but to have permission. And then teaching the teachers how to use their own stories to teach creative writing within their classrooms. And I know that was kind of a long explanation, but it wasn't just a super simple project. It evolved over time, and that's where the StoryBridge Award had come from.
So I understand, ma'am, and teacher training is the need of the hour, undoubtedly, because teachers need to integrate. It's not the traditional age-old method of rote memory that is going to work anymore. And so I think storytelling is one of the best ways in which you can influence a young mind and actually get children hooked on to learning or a particular subject. I remember my teachers, most of them, who used to narrate stories regarding a particular topic or anything. Otherwise, everything is there in the book. What's the difference? I read a book rather than attending a classroom. So undoubtedly, ma'am. So I think the literacy program that you took up in Belize was a huge success, and that is how it influenced teachers. And you were, creative enough to include indigenous stories so that they can inculcate whatever their own culture is and put that into. So students can relate more rather than picking up stories and being very utopian about it. True, ma'am. Agree, ma'am. Ma'am, yes. I'm very curious about what is therapeutic storytelling?
Oh, So that's a broad topic as well. If I were to summarize it, it can be using different types of stories in ways that are in service to recovery and healing. So some people have used folk tales as a way, as a bridge. It's to talk about things that might be either taboo to talk about, things that, oh, we don't talk about that. So a story is a way to come at it indirectly and then open up a way to talk about it gently, if that makes sense, in a more sensitive way rather than directly to what an issue might be. So that's one aspect of therapeutic storytelling. And then there are others where it's creating, part of the work I do is creating a safe space for people who are in recovery after trauma to be able to, we don't talk about the trauma itself. However, we talk about the impact that the trauma has on how the person sees themselves or interacts with other people because of how they see themselves, how they view themselves, and that affects how they see the world around them. So with therapeutic storytelling, it's the idea I had mentioned earlier, sometimes we get stuck in a problem story. And sometimes we think we ourselves are the problem. And there's a way to look at it where you can rather say the problem is the problem, the person is the person, and how can we be of service to that person finding a preferred story for their life? An example would be addiction. So if the person has a problem, they have a relationship with addiction, what other aspects do they also have about themselves? Maybe they're really courageous. Maybe they're really strong because there are days they win out over their addiction. So in therapeutic narrative therapy, they would focus on, oh, those times when you won out, you were strong, you stood up against addiction. Let's talk more about that. What helped you do that? How are you able to do that? And then strengthen that thread so that you start to, while honoring the addiction, diminish that thread. Because all of us are so much more than one aspect, which is why when you initially asked, who are you? Oh my gosh, well, I'm many different things. So are you. Each of us are so many different descriptors. And therapeutic story, another aspect of that is being of service to, what do you want your story to be? Right. What do you want your life to look like? And that a trauma or whatever you've been through, it impacts your life. It does not have to define your entire life.
Right. It's only a part of life. Only a part of life. One has to move on. So can I just sum it up in one statement, like what medicine is to body, story is to soul?
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. I love that.
Right. So that's what I realized, ma'am, because when a person undergoes a trauma, he or she withdraws into himself, and they're like, they may not be able to face themselves also. But then if there are therapies like it's just not medicine that is going to heal. You need to heal inwardly. So now I completely get it. What is therapeutic healing? So you're doing a job with hospitals, terminally ill patients, and prisoners. Amazing, ma'am. Because these
no, let me clarify. Those are so the work that's other storytellers are doing that. So the work I do is more with groups so far, where I don't know if you have YWCA in Kerala in India. That's an organization we have here, and some of them are in service to people who have come out of abusive relationships or childhood trauma. And so I'm working a lot with individual clients and with organizations in service too. So I just wanted to clarify that. I'm not yet in the prison system, although that is a goal I do have, is to go into prisons with this work. Yeah, so thank you for letting me clarify.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So somehow I got confused when initially you said that therapeutic storytelling is with hospitals and prisons. So I thought maybe you are into it, but then ultimately you have the goal of going there. And I think you do a great job with the expressions and the feeling that you bring into your speech. Undoubtedly, you are going to touch more and more lives and help them heal in a better way, is what I can understand. So, ma'am, what is your romance with the theater?
With the theater? Is that what you asked? My romance with the theater?
Yes.
Oh. You ask really good questions, and they're deep, by the way. They're really deep.
Thank you, ma'am.
I would say initially it was a space where, so I'm small in stature, and I'm short and I'm petite, and on
Just
a
like a puppy.
on a stage I could feel bigger. I could feel more empowered. I could be whoever I wanted. I could also step away from the trauma in my own household. So it was like an escape, because I could be whoever I wanted to on the stage. And then it quickly became, over time, it changed into a way to connect. And often in theater to talk about things that people might not be able to talk about. But on the stage, there are topics that are often shared that we might not talk about. And also, it's fun. It doesn't always have to be really serious. It was also fun. Doing children's theater was really fun. So keeping that fun element throughout, as well as knowing we can talk about really deep things. So now it's about connection. And honestly, it's why I like storytelling even more than theater, because that connection with the audience. In theater, you have what's called the fourth wall that keeps you sort of more separate. And in storytelling, you're more like this. You're more really together in it. And that's why I'm drawn even more to story.
That's lovely, ma'am. In fact, I had the good fortune of attending the Kathastu series, which was recently conducted by Ms. Sharon Matthews. And I was introduced to this by Mr. Sushant Mysorkar. Thankful to both of them, because it was a lovely experience. And that was when I came to know that storytelling is a real job. So it was really an eye-opener for me. So, ma'am, what has your work with World Bank been in association with?
Okay. So World Bank is actually teaching presentation skills and translating very technical, jargon-filled talks that are often full of data and research.
Dry.
And making it, yes, very dry, and making it more accessible and bringing in the human story. So the data only tells us a small part of the larger story, and it doesn't always tell us the human part. So my work there is to bring in, what's the human impact of this research you're doing? How does that affect people in real life in the countries that the World Bank serves? And I work across all sectors. So, and it's been virtual. I've been really grateful that most of my work has been virtual for the last 5 years. And I work with people from 160 different countries and countless cultures, which has been amazing. So I teach them to bring in the human aspect to their work and tell us more about not only the World Bank's impact, also valuing and honoring more deeply the people they are in service to. And that's really important to me, really important.
That's lovely. That's lovely. So corporate telling is all about bridging the human and the data gap, the numbers and the figures. That's amazing. That's amazing, ma'am. Ma'am, I wouldn't like to deprive my audience of listening to a live story from the Kristin Pedemonti herself. So stage is all yours, ma'am.
All right. So I would like to share a folk tale, and it's one of my favorite. It comes from Nigeria, and it's a traditional Yoruba story. Chief Oba called in his favorite servant and asked if he would be willing to go on a quest. Would you be willing to go in search of the most positive thing that God Obatala has given to humans? The servant looked at him and he said, "Oh, yes, sire. Anything you desire, I shall go." And so the servant head out. He walked across the grassy plain. He spoke to the men who were hunting the animals, the women who were collecting the fruits from the trees. He even spoke to the animals themselves. But he had not discovered the greatest gift that God Obatala had given. And so the servant hiked up the top of the tallest mountain, and he sat and he meditated. He listened to the wind, he listened to the birds, but he had not yet discovered the greatest gift that God Obatala had given. And so he hiked down the other side of the mountain, across another plain, all the way to the river. And he spoke to the men who were casting out their fishing nets, and the women doing laundry on the bankside. He even spoke to the fish. And finally, he discovered the greatest gift that God Obatala had given to humans. And with a joyful heart, he practically ran back across that plain, up the mountain, down the other side, across the next grassy plain, all the way to the home of the chief. The servant burst through the door, and the chief said, "Oh, what is it? What have you discovered?" He said, "Oh, sire, it's amazing. The greatest gift, the most positive thing that God Obatala has given to humans is the tongue." The chief looked at him and he said, "The tongue?" "Yes, with the tongue, we can speak words of kindness. We can speak words of love. We can work ourselves into someone's heart, and we can live there forever. And the elders, they can share their stories and wisdom with the next generation." And the chief looked at the servant and said, "This is good news indeed. This is very helpful." And then the chief thought for a moment and said, "Are you willing to go on another quest to discover the most negative, awful thing that God Obatala has given to humans? I believe this too is important for us to know." The servant thought for a moment. Yes, I will go. Anything that you ask." And so once again, he headed out across that grassy plain, and he spoke to the men hunting the animals, the women collecting the fruits from the trees, the animals themselves. But he had not discovered the most negative, awful thing God Obatala had given. So he hiked up that tallest mountain, sat at the top, meditated, listened to the wind and the birds, but he had not yet discovered the most negative thing. And so he hiked down the other side of the mountain, all the way across the grassy plain to the river, and he spoke to the men casting out their fishing nets, the women doing laundry on the bankside, and of course, he spoke to the fish. And then he discovered it, the most negative, awful thing that God Obatala had given to humans. And this time, with a heavy heart, he made his way back across that plain, up the mountain, down the other side, across the next grassy plain, all the way to the home of the chief. The chief greeted him, saying, "You look so sad. What is it? What have you discovered?" "Sire, it's awful. The most negative thing that God Obatala has given to humans is the tongue." The chief looked at him and he said, "The tongue? But how can this be?" "Because, sire, some people choose to use the tongue to speak words of gossip and words of hatred. Sometimes that hatred is so strong it breaks someone's heart into so many pieces it might never be repaired. And sometimes that hatred, it spreads, and that hatred grows and it turns into war. And the elders, they can't share their story with the next generation because the next generation goes off to fight, and some of them die." The chief looked at the servant and he said, "I'm sorry. I'm confused. I don't understand. How can the tongue be both the greatest gift and the most negative gift that God Obatala has given?" And the servant paused. So did the chief. And they sat, and they thought for a long while. And then the servant understood. He said, because we are not only given a tongue, we are given a mind, and we get to choose how we use the tongue. And the chief smiled and said, yes, and may we each choose wisely. Thank you.
This is beautiful. That is beautiful, Miss Pedemonti. So yes, the tongue is undoubtedly a double-edged sword. You use it anyway. And this is such a beautiful way of driving in lessons to the young ones as to what you can do with your tongue. Use it for the good or use it for the bad, without actually instructing them, hey, do this, don't do that. And I think this is a better way for children to understand, because generally what children do is, if the elders are telling them don't do this, that's the first thing they're going to do.
Exactly. They're
Right.
testing boundaries, they're testing things all the time.
Right, exactly. That was beautiful, ma'am, the expressions, and I'm sure my audience are going to go back to your channel. I'm sure you have a channel where my audience can actually go and listen to more and more of your stories, ma'am.
I do, and I'm in 2021 working on adding more to it, and there are also teacher training resources. So there's if they go on YouTube, if they go to @StorytellerKP, K for Kristin, P as in puppy for Pedemonti, Storyteller KP. That's my YouTube channel. And if anyone is interested in the therapeutic storytelling, I do want to let you know I do have a website, and it's called Steer, like a car. Steer Your Story is the other website, and you can find more about the therapeutic work that I do too, just in case anybody needs that.
Lovely. So audience, you know what is the power of storytelling. It is not only for young children to put them to sleep or to scare them into not doing naughty things, as to do not get off the bed, there are goblins down there. Right? So it's not just for children, it is for everybody. It is even for the corporate world, corporate storytelling, therapeutic storytelling. There's a range of it, unlimited possibilities. And Ms. Pedemonti has just told where you can access her. I will be giving all of her handles in the descriptions below in this video. So you're most welcome to get in touch with Ms. Pedemonti to enhance your skills and to understand the world from a better perspective. Because the other day I was talking to Mr. Tony Cranston, and he was telling something like storytellers are sages. I completely believe that, because you are in a world of your own and you bring so much to the world. It was so beautiful listening to storytellers like you and Mr. Cranston, ma'am. I am blessed that I could invite you on Braintunes with Archana and have a conversation with you people.
I feel blessed. Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
It was lovely, ma'am, and we'll keep in touch with you, because I'm really interested in what is therapeutic storytelling myself. So definitely. It was amazing getting to meet you on the penultimate day of 2020. Wishing you an advanced Happy New Year, ma'am, and hope to see you very soon back again on Braintunes with more stories. Because yes, my younger audience will be more than happy to listen to stories from Barbie Kristin Pedemonti.
Thank you so much, and a Happy New Year to you as well. May you stay healthy, may you be happy, and may you continue to share your good works too.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was lovely having you. Bye-bye, ma'am.